Welcome into this week's edition of the Research Corner. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Joe Antoshak. Joe, how's it going?
Hey, Tony, how you doing?
Happy to be back. I know you worked closely with John Gallagher in his article. He came on and talked about it a little earlier. We're going to take a stab at talking about what's going on, truck fatalities. You put this chart together for him, included in the article. Kind of walk us through what this is, what we're looking at, and kind of your key takeaways.
Yeah, so one of the things our editorial team does a really good job of is sort of looking at road safety over time. And this is kind of like a periodic focus, right? We did a big ELD mandate series, I want to say a few months ago, earlier this year. John Gallagher wrote this article last week about some new FMCSA data that showed that year over year in Q1, there was a pretty dramatic drop-off in the number of fatalities that involved large trucks, right, which is a very good thing. You see that chart, you see that there's that big drop-off, but the other thing you notice, of course, is that it is trending upward, right? Like from 2013 to now, we've seen a pretty considerable increase.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you interpret that, right? You're seeing the year over year decline, but it's still going up. So what does that mean? And that's what, I wanted to talk about a little bit today to kind of get into like the per capita basis of how many fatalities per trucks we're seeing now.
Yeah, because while you see the increase, it's not really a surprise because you have more trucks on the road now than what you did previously. And I think some of that, like you said, you see it's gone up. Well, I think naturally it would go up when you add more. Like I guess the question really is, it's not what is the number, it's what is the ratio of fatalities per truck, right? I think that's maybe one of the more insightful pieces, and like what is that done over time? Because really, when you see growth in the number of fatalities, if you kept things consistent or steady, that would be a concern, but we haven't. And I think that's the thing. And we'll pull up the next chart. You can see the growth that we've talked about in the tractor count. I mean, you're talking, what is it, 65% since 2013? It's a massive increase versus a 16% increase in the fatalities. So really, I mean, those takeaways, what are we looking at, Joe?
Yeah, exactly. So, you bring up a good point. The ratio would be a really good way to look at it. And that chart, not exactly ratio, but it does show in a pretty simple way the rate of growth for total tractors. So that's, for hire and private included. It's much greater than the growth in fatalities involving large trucks, right?
Yep.
So that means on a per truck basis, per large truck basis, and this is gross weight over 10,000 pounds, right? That number is declining, which means, on the whole, large trucks are sort of less of a threat to, anyone else on the road. At least that's what the statistics point out. Now, this reality doesn't point to an exact specific thing that is making the difference. Most likely, sort of a confluence of things. One potentially being the ELD mandate, right? And, different hours of service regulations. You have certain areas implementing, kind of like the underride guards that can reduce certain kinds of fatal collisions, right, with civilian cars. But I think overall, I mean, there is some mixed data, right? And we actually got into that in our ELD series a few months ago. But on the whole, it seems very positive to see that, we're increasing the number of tractors by a lot.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing, more crashes per truck. We're not seeing more injuries per truck. We're not seeing more fatalities per truck. And that's really important. I mean, and anyone who works in, freight transportation in supply chain, we're all about efficiency, right? Making it more efficient, and safety is a big part of that.
Yeah.
It just all plays into, kind of a more efficient, safer, clearer supply chain.
Absolutely. One of the things I wanted to touch on, and I brought the chart up because John included it in his, and I kind of wanted to take a look at it, just at the thought, right? We talked about this increase in tractor count. Looking at carrier details, the net change in authorities, right? These numbers from the FMCSA, this decline is from Q1. If you really look at where we saw declines, this isn't a factor of there's people leaving the market, we're seeing less fatalities just because people are leaving the market. And I think that is the important distinction to make, that the ratio, like we're still, yes, really starting kind of really, I mean, we haven't been negative the entire quarter until the first quarter of this year, but it's not at a rate, right, that we saw this growth previously. And I think that's the important, is like, we haven't, to like offset it. I mean, even if you go back and look, we're barely higher than where we were in 2021. And we've added, throughout 2021, we added 2,000 carriers a week. We haven't lost those. And I think that's this important distinction to make, is like, yes, we're losing carriers out of the market. So thus, realistically, there's fewer tractors on the road, but it's just not been at the same rate. So not all of this decline is just subject to or attributed to that. Is that the right way of thinking of it?
So something we're doing is working to actually improve safety on the road. And that's, I think, the main takeaway. And that's very optimistic, I think, and it's positive for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So something to pay attention to as we move forward, just kind of this overall trend. Again, I think one thing, Joe, we can talk about this, going and looking at that ratio and what it actually has come out to of fatalities per tractor or the like. I think that's something to look out for in the future. But Joe, thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition of the Research Corner. Right now, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more Freight Waves Now.